behalf of Wendy and her family, I'd like to welcome you here this afternoon and offer you the hospitality of this place where Finn and Wendy made their faith home for quite a number of years. It's a bit overwhelming to see so many people. We didn't know how many to expect. We thought that we would fill the building, but we didn't think we'd overfill it. And that's what's happened. So we hope that you can stay as comfortable as you can as we move through this significant time of remembering Finn and honouring him and the time that he spent amongst us. We've come this afternoon in the midst of life to grieve the death of a beloved brother, husband, father and grandfather, Finn, and to give thanks for his life. Death and life are one in the purposes of love. A follower of Jesus once said, "If you grieve with all your heart, you shall find healing." Someone else said, "Life is like a circle. We are bound together to each other and to the earth. To deny this interconnectedness is to do violence to ourselves and to all that is." So we are here, indeed, not only to move through our own sorrow and our thanksgiving, but to gather around Wendy and Ian and Paul and Amber, Alan and Leslie, Sandra, Jack, Angela, Sasha, with our empathy and support. This afternoon we will lace our grief with the humour of past days, interweave our sorrows and our joys, hold as one our thanksgiving and our mourning. For life and death are not enemies, but rather part of the cycle of this complex universe, of which we are a small but significant part. Will you join me in prayer? O God, we come into your presence asking why joy ends in sorrow, why love extracts its price in tears. We ask you to help us live with the mystery of life and death. Help us to see that even if our questions could be answered, the pain would be no less and the loneliness would remain. Help us then to walk with you through the darkness with faith into tomorrow. Give us comfort, give us courage, and turn us to deeds that bless the living. In the silence we reflect on our shock and our pain and our loss at the death of Finn, while recalling that in the mystery of love, life springs from death. We remember that tears are for the washing away of grief, hope is for the building of dreams, and love is the tender life force which conquers death. So in the mystery of love, we remember that life springs from death. We acknowledge that there are many things in life which we cannot understand, many things we must accept. May the power of love enable us not to succumb to bitterness or pointless questioning, but rather grow to live life with more tenderness, courage and purpose than ever before. May this be for us all, for in the mystery of love, life indeed springs from death. And we join together now in a hymn that has been chosen because it invites us to reflect, to come to that still place at our centre where we can focus and attend to the mourning and the thanksgiving that is before us. Be still my soul, the Lord is on your side. Bear patiently the cross of grief and pain. Plead to your God to order and provide. In every change, He faithful will remain. Be still, my soul, your best, your heavenly prayer. Through thorny ways, leads to a joyful end. Be still, my soul, your God will undertake to guide the future as He has the past. Your hope, your confidence, let nothing shake. All now mysterious shall be clear at last. Be still, my soul, the tempest still obey. His voice to rule them once on Galilee. Be still, my soul, when dearest friends depart, and all is dark in the veil of tears. Then you shall better know His heart, who comes to soothe your sorrow, calm your fears. Be still, my soul, thy Jesus can restore the trust and hope that strengthened you before. Be still, my soul, the hour is hastening on, when we shall be forever with the Lord. When disappointment, grief, and fear are gone, sorrow forgotten, love's pure joy restored. Be still, my soul, when change and tears are past. All safe and blessed, we shall meet at last. Please be seated. We pray once again. Our Creator God, we reflect on the pilgrimage of life, on how we all come from the earth and return to its womb. We acknowledge that we share this experience with all living creatures through the unity of nature. In death as in life, we are all one family. We give thanks for the life of Hewitt and for all the memories that his death brings to mind. In the strength of God's love, we determine to keep alive in us those qualities which we admired in Finn. For in death as in life, we are all one family. Amen. I'm going to invite Angela to come up now and read to us from one of the passages that gave Finn a lot of comfort in his final days.
Romans 8:35, 37, 39. Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? No. In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ our Lord.
We come to the time of remembering and giving thanks. The best way that we can give thanks for Fenn's life is to remember his story and to know his story. And perhaps those who know his story best are his intimate family. So we're going to ask first Alan, and then Ian, and then Jack to come and help us share in Fenn's story and thus give thanks. Alan.
In 1942, during the dark days of World War II, a 10-year-old Perth boy wrote a school essay, and in that he said what he would do if he had 3 wishes. That boy was Fenn Hewitt, my dad, and this is what he wrote. My 3 wishes. If I had 3 wishes, it would be very good. The first one I'd wish would be to travel around the world, first from Fremantle to Melbourne, then to Adelaide, from Adelaide to America, then from America to Britain, from Britain to Egypt, and from Egypt to Switzerland. Then I'd make my home and live peacefully. The second wish would be to have lots of money and give some to the poor. With the rest of my money, I would give some to the Red Cross, and the rest I would share with my mother, father and sister. My third wish is to have a bike with tubes and tyres that would never puncture and could never break. I could go to all the beaches at any time without having to wait for buses and trains. So now I'd like you to join me in celebrating my dad's life by showing you how this early demonstration of his character and values and other events impacted the remaining 74 years of his fruitful life. Here are some early photos of Dad and his family. In his childhood, the compassion Dad showed in his second wish was stifled by being brought up in the exclusive Brethren. This cult prohibited tertiary education, radio, movies, dancing, recorded music, socialising with any outside people, and fun of any kind really. It also showed little compassion for the poor, as the wealthier families would snub the poorer members, for example, by driving their limos past the tram stop where Dad's family was waiting. So Dad decided to leave the Brethren aged 17, even though he was harassed and coerced to rejoin, while his sister and other family members remained members for a few years more. This experience not only showed that he had incredible courage, but it also drove him to promise to himself that when he grew up, he would never be poor. And although this was indeed the case, he paid a price, because during several bouts of severe depression he struggled with over the years, he would sometimes have irrational fears about not having enough. However, there were some good times ahead. At a party one night when he was 23 years old and already working at the Bank of New South Wales, he spied an attractive 17-year-old brunette across the room and said to his friend, "I really like the look of her, I'm going to marry her." And he did. Of course, my mum Wendy wasn't in a bathing suit at the party, and he did have to wait 3 years for her to grow up before he could marry her. During that time, Dad met Mum's younger sisters, Lynn and Helen, who were 6 and 8 years old, and they didn't know what to make of him at first because they'd overheard Wendy saying to a friend that she really liked Ben, but he'd heard that he was a bit of a wolf. So when he first came to call, Wendy's mum Elsie was in the kitchen and saw Lynn and Helen spying on Fenn through the sliding door into the lounge and asked them what they were doing. They replied, "We want to see what a wolf looks like." But in spite of this, they got to know and love Dad, and he doted on them. On March 22, 1958, Mum and Dad married, and remained married through thick and thin for 58 years. By this time, Dad was quite self-confident, but Mum was shy and dependent on Dad, so he encouraged her to do a deportment course, and this helped so much so that she did some modelling. He also encouraged Mum through the years in many other ways. Dad was also very supportive of equal rights for everyone. So just after Mum turned 21, on his 27th birthday on March 21st, 1959, which happened to be the day of the WA state election, when Mum asked him for whom she should vote, he told her that women had suffered and even died from the right to vote, so she should research all the political parties and make up her own mind. In those early years, Dad studied accounting part-time at night school and built his career by moving to Shell Corporation because he didn't want to be closer to the country. He quickly moved up the ranks and became their real estate manager, finding and negotiating the purchase of service station sites. The knowledge and experience he gained at Shell also enabled him to buy some sites for our family, which turned out to be good investments, but in later years, it also resulted in stress and heavy costs to deal with some contamination. Then on the 23rd of March 1960, my brother Ian arrived, followed 2 years later by Paul on Dad's birthday on the 21st of March. I arrived in late March a couple of years later, so March has always been a busy and happy time in our family. Having 3 active boys was a challenge, so much so that when my dad once asked Mum's parents to look after us for a couple of weeks, they said, "You've got to be joking." Anyway, in this photo you will see the green Falcon station wagon we used to own. One day when I was about 4 years old, Dad had to take us somewhere and I jumped in the back with my blanket and joined Ian and Paul on the big bench seat. No seatbelts in those days, of course. As we went round the first corner, the back door swung open and I suddenly found myself on the road sitting on my blanket. So I got up and ran after the car yelling, "Wait for me!" Fortunately I was fine, but Dad was shaken up and told us, "Don't tell your mother." And we didn't, not for many years anyway. Dad's career was going well, but because he wanted to stay in Perth, he refused a promotion to Shell head office in Melbourne and decided to leave. This didn't worry him because with a friend, ironically called Graham Friend, he went into a number of successful ventures and small businesses over the next few years. One of these was developing blocks of apartments, and since his first wish was about travelling, in 1969 he asked Mum how she would feel about selling our house in Salter Point and using the money to develop flats for income while we went off to live, work and travel in the UK and Europe. Mum trusted Dad's judgment totally, so they went ahead, and incidentally those flats are still there in Arundel Crescent, which is just along the road there, here in Wembley Downs. After that, we got our passports and off we went. And as you can see, we were pretty hard to miss. Perhaps the best fun day of the 10 months we spent overseas was in Switzerland, where we spent the whole day tobogganing, and Dad pulled a toboggan up the hill for us again and again until he was totally exhausted. When we got to Austria, Dad developed appendicitis and had to have an operation. However, when we got the bill, it was astronomical, so Dad and Mum went to the British Embassy for advice. There was no Australian embassy there at the time, and they agreed that the bill was way too high and suggested that we skip the country and send a more reasonable amount to the hospital when we got back to England. So at midnight that night, we snuck out of the hotel, got in our car and drove over the Alps a la The Sound of Music. And of course, when we got back, Mum and Dad did send the money, or so they tell us. Back in Perth, Dad was involved in his new business, which built patios and garages, and intentionally building the character and values of his 3 sons. Over those years, we got taken to this church, took a foreign student under our wings, had a man who had been disabled by a brain injury spend many Sundays with us, and had numerous visits to an Aboriginal hostel to give the house parents some respite. Dad didn't specifically teach us how to run a business over the years. We must have learned around the dinner table as if by osmosis, since all 3 of us have owned and operated small businesses ourselves. It's a training that has served us well over the years. There were also some other consequences of Dad having been raised in the Exclusive Brethren. Although he loved singing hymns and even hummed them during the last few days of his life when he could barely speak, he didn't like music playing in the background at home or in the car, and had little interest in sport, except for maybe an occasional game of tennis. But Dad always tried to do the right thing by us, so although he never took us to a footy match, he did take us to a cricket match once, and only once, since we all together decided it was about as exciting as watching grass grow. I'm sure there also wasn't a lot of handyman activity in Dad's upbringing, so this wasn't one of his strong points, and may explain his 3rd wish regarding puncture-proof tyres and bikes that don't break. But Dad really was a softie at heart. After telling us in no uncertain terms that the new dog Fred wasn't allowed on any furniture, Mum arrived home one day to find Dad lying on their bed reading and Fred on the other side with his head on Mum's pillow. The mid-70s recession was a tough time, and after selling the business, Dad went to work at the Metropolitan Regional Planning Authority and then the Small Business Development Corporation, advising small business people. The next few years also saw Mum and Dad extend their partnership in life into a wonderful partnership in their poster wholesaling business, where Dad did the admin and Mum the sales repping and buying. During this time, a staff member admitted that they were gay and that they were terrified that they would lose their job, which was a common thing in those days. Of course, it didn't change anything, and this was yet another example of Dad's acceptance of the differences in people and showing us how to live. And we all had great fashion sense then too. It became evident that it was time to sell the business and look for something else. Times were tough during the early 80s recession, and that, along with the passing of Mum's mum, to whom Dad was very close, led to a depressive episode which resulted in a shift in his personality to being less tolerant and with a shorter fuse than previously, which led to some family challenges over the following years. But Dad recovered and continued looking for another business, but nothing suitable came up. And since he had income from investments, he got a small office in Subiaco and immersed himself in financially supporting and personally working with dozens of community and charitable groups such as the YMCA, Lions, and Community Aid Abroad for what turned out to be the rest of his life, in line with his second wish. These included business consulting and accounting with volunteer groups in places such as Pakistan, PNG, Micronesia, Laos, Tuvalu and Mulan on the edge of the Great Sandy Desert. And of course, this travel was consistent with his first wish. Although Dad was an urban person who enjoyed reading whodunits, walking and going to movies and a cinema group, he also cared about the environment, was a member of the Greens, and he even had an eco-friendly cardboard coffin with rope handles, which he would have been very happy about. Social justice was very important to Dad, and one of the many ways he demonstrated this was by being a valuable congregation member and supporter of this church for 38 years, where he also regularly did readings and was a member of the Finance Committee. Dad also helped and supported our family in many ways, but most of all, he just enjoyed being with us, like coming over to my house with Mum every Sunday for afternoon tea. He doted on the grandchildren, Jack and Angela, who really enjoyed having him around. Although Angela was heard to say, "Quick everyone, hide your chocolate, Grampy is coming around." He was very fond of his chocky, and in honour of that we have some chocolate out there for you to share this afternoon. Dad also attended numerous plays, open days, martial arts gradings, etc., even though they weren't really his cup of tea. About 3 years ago he came over for dinner, and during the conversation he explained, "Well, of course, I know all about sex." After a stunned silence, followed by fits of laughter, we worked out that what he meant was sects, as in religious cults. In recent years, he also enjoyed getting to know his surprise granddaughter Sandra, and I'm also very happy to report that the tolerant and patient part of Dad's original personality returned. Mum and Dad did lots of travelling as per Dad's first wish. And he also loved some adventure too, being particularly keen on whitewater rafting. And as you can see here, although he was a lot older than everyone else, that didn't bother him. And one of his favourite things over the past couple of years was being Santa at our family Christmas and ringing the bell with joyful ho-ho-hos and distributing gifts with the help of his elf. So, now, let's remember back to my Dad's 3 wishes and review how he did in making his wishes come true. Wish number 1, world travel. Melbourne, tick. America, tick. Britain, tick. Egypt, tick. Switzerland, tick. He even made it to Adelaide, tick. Wish number 2, become financially independent, tick. Give lots of money to the poor and charities, big tick. Provide for and support his family, big tick. Wish number 3, have a bike with tyres that don't puncture and never breaks. Well, perhaps he has one of those now where he is. But he achieved so much in his life, I think we'll give that to him too. Tick. I told you how Dad went out of his way to bring us up with strong characters and good values. But most of all, he showed us how it is done by the way he lived his fruitful life. It was never about him. It was about service to others. Even in his later years, when he could no longer help out intellectually, He was very happy to do basic tasks such as inserting letters in envelopes at Princess Margaret Hospital, the Arthritis Foundation and cancer support groups, etc. We owe a huge debt to our dad for who we are today. He led by example, as in, do as I do, not just do as I say. But ultimately, Dad cared about our family the most, and of course about my mum even more. It has been an honour to stand before you today and share these precious memories of my dad. He will be missed by all, but his memory will live on in us forever. I love you, Dad, and will miss you more than these words can say.
Good day, everyone. My name is Ian Hewitt, eldest son of Ben. Don't know what happened to me. Good father, but sometimes it doesn't come across that well. I didn't particularly like the original song because it had stuff like grief and pain and sadness in it, and I don't feel any of those emotions at all. In fact, when I was told he passed, I was like, yes, because he was having no fun. And as John Cougar Mellencamp often says, life can go on long after the joy of living has gone. And that's my greatest fear. I'd rather be dead than lying in a bed, like that. So, and as it turns out, so is father. But I go on a tangent and I'll actually read what I wrote. Like a lot of fathers and sons, we were very different. He had three sons. One was very much like him, studious, university educated, family man, etc., etc. Dad was, Alan, who you just showed, was very much like him. Accountants, university degrees. Dad was an accountant, and they were very similar. I'll never forget, I was the first time I remember being proud of my father was we were on a ship from Fremantle to Genoa, and it was their first. They'd sold one of these blocks of flats that you heard about, and they finally had the first time in their life they had some money. So Dad's brilliant theory was he would go to Genoa to Stuttgart in Germany, buy a 250 SL Mercedes. We would jump on a ship in Fremantle and meet up in Genoa, and for 9 months we'd drive this Merc around Europe. And that was the first time I also thought, oh, you can make money not by just working for Bunnings, it sort of opened the entrepreneurial thing in me that there's other ways, because as it turns out, when we got back after that 12 months, he flogged the Merc, and what we made on that pretty much paid for the trip. And I thought, genius, and all of us have been entrepreneurs ever since, and I often put it down to that Merc. And as I said, Alan was very much like Dad, and whereas Paul and I were far more, we got the more adrenaline junkie type style. We'd rather be doing 256 in a Ferrari on a racetrack rather than playing chess on a ship. Not that we all didn't love each other to the most, we were just quite different people. And of course, a guy that, wants to drive a Ferrari doesn't really understand someone who gets off on a math problem. Dad would actually get off on doing some long division, and I'd rather slash my wrist, and I'm sure he was the same. He'd rather not be a passenger with me. So anyway, I'm trying to add a bit of humour here. About 5 years ago, my mother came up with a brilliant idea. And she suggested that each of Dad's sons had lunch with him weekly. She said to me one day, you don't know your dad that well. You love him and all that, and, respect. But, how well do you know him, And like a lot of sons and fathers, how often do you sit down and say, so, tell me about what it was like when you were 14? it doesn't sort of happen. And I have to tell you, I thought, oh, this is going to be great, you know. Lunch with Dad every Wednesday. We've got a lot in common. He can talk chess and I'll talk about the latest Ferrari, you know. But as it turns out, it was brilliant. Some of you will have already worked this out, but it's amazing how much your father learns between when you're about 21 and middle-aged. They become a lot cooler and learn so much. At 21, he knew nothing almost, and by the time I was at middle-aged, he was incredibly wise. And I'm not sure how that happens, but it did. And I would actually ask him, you know, questions, and he had wise answers, you know, which as a little kid, you always tend to think of your parents just as what would you say, as discipline rather than equals. So anyway, I've got an hour with Dad over at a coffee club in Harbour Town, and you know, what are we going to talk about? And there'll be something in the paper, and then we found out, oh, we actually, and I guess because I'm his son, and morally we're similar, that he's a strong believer in that taxation should be in the form of death duties. In other words, the person who's just died can't use the funds, and it's been proven that it's quite detrimental to kids to be given stacks of money to inherit too much money. So we both had that in common, and we were strong. And then we also, I'm very much into a book called Dignity in Dying, called Final Exit, which is all about that. Basically, to put it as I put here, we will go to a vet, any vet, and if the vet says, I'm sorry, you know, your cat, it's really sick and it'd be kinder to put it down, we have no qualms of goodbye cat, you know, pat, 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 and away you go. However, we often keep our infinitely more beloved relatives alive due to some outdated religious dogma that both of us didn't really understand, and we're both hoping that that will change as society gets more enlightened. So a lot of that sort of stuff came out. We had a lot of similar beliefs that were important. I also found a lot of respect for him where he would vote, especially politically, he would vote what he felt best was for society. Truthfully, what was best for Australia or the world. Probably wouldn't have voted for Trump. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have. So anyway, and he would literally vote for higher taxation, for example, which was, you know, there was a time when he actually voted for higher taxation for the wealthy, which would reduce his own income by quite a lot. But that shows true character and following your conscience rather than chasing the almighty dollar. And very few people I've met do that. I also asked him once, don't know why, I think I was staying with Mum and Dad with one of my trips down from Thailand. I live in Phuket. Dad, what's your basic philosophy for living one's life? You know, I was wondering at the time. I don't really go to I have my own spiritual beliefs and I read a lot of books. And I believe that this is, you know, basically a stage and we're all merely players and all that. But anyway, I asked him that question. And just instantly he said, oh, simply it's to leave this place in a better condition than how I found it. And if anyone truly did that, or at least tried to do that, it was Ken Hewitt. I'm not sure I could even keep track of the amount of, since I've lived there, the charities and the charities I couldn't even keep track of the amount of charities he donated money and time to. A lot of people, it's easy enough to write a check to, you know, Lions Club, but to sit there putting envelopes for PMH is a whole different thing. And he donated a lot of his money, which is easy, and time, which is not easy. And again, that gave me a lot of respect. Also, let me at this point mention my mother, Wendy. They were a true partnership. One was truly half, they were one was really half without the other. Dad probably more so than Mum, but basically Mum, Fen would have all his moral thing, and Mum would allow it to happen and remind him that he'd already done this or whatever, and it was a true, perfect 58-year partnership. And there's not many of them. The percentage at the moment in the world, in Australia and America, is 51% of all people get divorced. And 58 years I watched two people love themselves. And Dad came out of hospital 4 times after breakdowns and was a slightly different person each time. And Mum would have to bring him back to who he really was. And I only found this out as I got older. And that took courage you can't imagine, and I don't want to go into it because I'll cry. So the devotion was there. Dora, there's not much left. Alan, always go first, by the way, I learned, because otherwise your younger brother will rip off all the good bits. At this point, let me mention my mother, Wendy. With what you have learned above, I hope you can imagine the devotion and courage it took to keep Dad able to function to achieve all that he did. The love and dedication she showed in those last few years when caring for Dad at his worst, and we're talking, 7 months in Greylands and some non-fun times, shall we say, touched my heart deeply and was nothing short of heroic. If they made a movie, she'd be the hero, and but no one would believe it. In conclusion, and I can't stress this enough, and I was telling someone once, Ben Hewitt, or I would have said my dad, was a gentleman. And I realised they'd misunderstood. And I said, no, I don't mean in the sense of being well brought up and opening doors for women, which of course he did. He was well brought up and he would open doors for women. What I really meant was he was a gentle man. In my whole life, I can't remember him hitting me in anger or otherwise. Now, Mum had a wooden spoon for that before he got home, and so I would say I can't say there was no discipline at all. I think, in fact, my brother Paul once chopped it up so she couldn't find it, which I always thought, well done, Paul. But she got a new one. What I'm trying to say is he couldn't even squash a bug. If there was a bug there and everyone else would have just, they all sprayed it, Dad would probably usher it outside. He just was a gentle person. He didn't kill anything. And Mum would say, we also were very, very lucky. You saw our dog Fred. We had a cat and a dog, and both of them lived for 18 years. And that dog, Fred, was our faithful companion for 18 years and was by our side at all times and protected. We didn't have keys for our house. We didn't need one. We had Fred. He could hear our cars. Oh, that's Paul coming home. That's Alan coming home. Hey, I don't know that car. And I don't know how they do that, but we didn't need a security system. We had Fred, and nobody ever would have dared come into our place. Fred was there. So anyway, as I said, Mum would say, Ben, get Fred, our faithful dog of 18 years, off the bed. And Dad would say, shoo, Fred, shoo, 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 which was about as effective as telling a cat to do card tricks. And he just simply was unable to be violent, and we'd go in and just push him off or whatever, but he was unable to be violent in any way, a true pacifist. In fact, his brother-in-law was a conscientious objector in the war and did refuse to go and shoot people. So anyway, with the and then I was going to say he was unable to be violent in any way, a true pacifist. And trust me, with the 3 sons he had, he could have committed murder, and no court in the land would have convicted him. So thanks for everything, Dad. I know you're having a better time now than you were recently, and I'm so glad that life did not go on too much longer after the joy of living had gone. We'll all miss you.
I'd just like to say that I'd like to address 3 things as I speak today. So, firstly, as me and my sister were growing up, we had nicknames for our grandparents, as every child does. For Wendy, we called her Nanny, which as we grew older turned into Nan. And when we were children, for Fen, we called him Grampy, which, unlike Nan's name, never dropped the Y. And so I will continue to call him Grampy today. Secondly, even though I'm not speaking from experience, I'm sure that you will all agree with me that a parent's greatest gift they can give to their children is to bestow upon them a brilliant disposition of the greatest personal qualities and lead them towards honourable life choices. To give your children character, stature, integrity, moral fibre, and if lucky, prestige and respect from others around them. I look upon my family and see all these aspects and more in every single one of them, and realise that luck was never a part of it. For we have had a life mentor and teacher who has given us these qualities. And as such, I would like to share a few that I see in his 3 sons, my father and 2 uncles. Qualities the Grampy taught them, and in doing so had a massive impact on their lives, and in turn, the lives that have come after them. Valour, a strong backbone to stand up for yourself and what you believe, with reason enough to still see the points of view of others and listen to them with respect. Courage, to look risk eye to eye and meet it with bravery, with reason enough to still be calculated and calm. Pride, in the family name, pride in the family name, but who you are as an individual also. With reason enough to still treat all others with the exact same respect and regard. Strength, both physically and mentally, to have control over your own capability and a firm grip on your emotions, with reason enough to let your weaknesses show when they need to. Integrity, to always speak the truth and always talk from the heart, with reason enough to know what to say when the time requires. In these late few days, every member of this family has realised something. We are a family of feeling, not saying. We all do not tell each other how we feel quite often enough. This includes how we do not say, "I love you," nearly enough as we should, no matter how deeply and sincerely we all feel it. Which brings me to my 3rd point, and another quality that we got from Grampy. Love. To love the people around you and keep the ones you care about close, without reason enough to let strife or trouble stop you from doing so. To disregard thoughts of malice, to love unconditionally and without reason. To always see the best aspects of people and let that shape your image of them. To always see people in their best light and help them reach it. You probably heard him say this earlier, but my father always says to your children, do not do what you say, but do as you do. And Grampy led by example with these qualities that I've listed and many, many more. He is loved and missed, but while he's gone, his qualities that he has passed on to his sons, and many more, shall be here forever, and the impact that he had on many people's lives shall not be forgotten. Thank you.
Now I'd like to read a reflection from Jan Hutchison, who lives in Canberra and is a family friend back from the days when Mum and Dad were leaders of the youth group at the Scarborough Church of Christ. Jan says that she wishes she could be here in person to read this. She says, "I have so many good memories of Fen as a generous, honest, funny and kind man. The poem I have chosen is Moments from Felicity by Mary Oliver, which reminds me of Fen's generosity to others. There are moments that cry out to be fulfilled, like telling someone that you love them, or giving your money away, all of it. Your heart is beating, isn't it? You're not in chains, are you? There is nothing more pathetic than caution, when headlong might save a life, even possibly your own." Finally, Jan says, "I'll always remember Fen, a true friend in every situation."
Thank you to Alan and Ian and Jack for those fine tributes. I'm sure they've awoken perhaps some lost memories of Fen from within amongst ourselves, and we see the full stature of the man. We're going to just have a quiet moment of reflection now as the 23rd Psalm is sung to us, so that we can offer our own quiet thanksgiving. Often in discussions with Fen, he'd say, "I don't like the Old Testament. I think it should be ripped out and we just keep the New Testament." He couldn't reconcile the sometimes harsh pictures of God that we encounter in the Old Testament with the love of Christ encountered in the New Testament. I said, "Okay, so that means the 23rd Psalm as well." He says, "Oh no, you can keep that." So we'll keep that as our reflection. Thank you, Simon. Our program says words of encouragement, and we'll be drawing our service towards a close in this area. The words of encouragement I want to bring come from conversations over the years with Fen and Wendy. They understood the cycles of life. that life and death were part and parcel of what it means to be part of this wonderful universe that is a gift to us. I'd like to read a reflection called Acceptance, because acceptance of this nature, instead of fighting against it, is the secret to their vitality together. The year goes around and season faithfully follows season. The boughs that bend to breaking in the winter wind will fill with sap once more and burst into young, fresh green. They bend low a second time in summer with full leaf and blossom, and then autumn will glow red and fiery until each dying leaf makes a scarlet carpet to soften the footsteps of winter once again. So life and death are part of the unending rhythm of creation, renewal and love. As we give thanks to God in Christ for the beginning of life, so we trust in God for the end of life, and we are content to be part of that wonderful, continuing mystery. As our conversations have continued, not only with Finn and Wendy, but others in this congregation over recent times, we've come to understand that cycle as an ever-continuing circle of embracing change, moving through the suffering and pain that that change entails, bringing us through to a deeper union. And that deeper union, as Ian has suggested, moves us on into deeper, more meaningful service. And we can only wonder at what that deep and meaningful service now looks like for Finn. So please join me once again in prayer. God of mercy and love, we now give you thanks for all the ways Finn shared his life with us and with others, in strength and in weakness, in achievement and failure, in the brightness of joy and the darkness of despair. We remember him as one of us. Now that he has died, we commend him into the hands of a faithful Creator and most loving Saviour. Give us such faith that by day and by night, in all times and in all places, we may without fear entrust those who are dear to us to your never-failing love, in this life and in the life to come. In your infinite wisdom, goodness and power, work in him the merciful purpose of your perfect will, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. We're going to sing 2 verses of our final hymn. Farewell, we come to send you on the way. We all must walk so final, secret, strange, in wandering or in grief, in hope we pray. Pilgrims of time to one who does not change, whose love can lead us through the darkest night to life and joy in everlasting light. Now for your life, your love, and laid us near. Our hearts give thanks, your Spirit we bring. To him who told his sad flock to feed, walk I am with you all till time shall end, whose love can lead us through the darkest night to life and joy in everlasting light. Just before I pronounce the benediction, I remind you that refreshments will be served in the side room, just off to my left there. I see the sun is out and the wind has died down, so the courtyard will be a comfortable place to meet and greet one another. And because of the large crowd, I'm going to ask those that are in the know around this place to just stack some of the chairs against the wall in case, so that you can use this area in here as well. So may the Lord hold you and keep you. May the Lord give you comfort. May the Lord shine his face upon you and give you peace. And we go out to one of two Fenn's favourite tune. He didn't know the words to it, but he liked this tune.